Hi and welcome to the MCA Podcast, your fix for everything innovative in advertising production. I'm Pat Murphy and I've been working in this industry for more than 35 years now. I've seen a lot of changes, but know there's plenty more around the corner. Each week on the podcast, you'll get to hear one of the movers and shakers who are shaping the world of advertising production for the future, and we'll dive into some of the key challenges facing our sector today and how we're best placed to overcome them. Today, we're talking to Hsiung, Global Managing Director of RSA Films. Having led RSA Films UK for 17 years, in 2020, Kai accepted the role of Global Managing Director, ensuring that RSA maintains its place as one of the world's leading production houses and continues to create some of the most culturally transformative and influential creative across every medium. In 2023, she became chairwoman of the Young Director Award and has always been an avid supporter of young and diverse talent in our industry. Kai, thanks so much for joining me here on our advertising production podcast.
Hi, Pat. Lovely to be here. Thank you for asking me. I'm fascinated to know what you're going to ask, actually.
Well, I'm going to start talking to you about, your very first early years of your career. You went to Brighton Art College.
Yes, I did. I did a BA in fine art printmaking. I was very lucky. I also did my second year there, I did a swap to a college in New York. But being the innocent and without, obviously, internet back then, New York, I thought, I'm going to New York City. I actually ended up in Buffalo, New York, in a tiny little college in the middle of nowhere. But it was still a great experience. And then I went on to the Royal College of Art for 2 years to do an MA in fine art printmaking. And because of that, you obviously, with an MA, you're allowed to teach at higher education levels. So I did then teach art for a couple of years on foundation, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But unfortunately, due to changes in contracts and things, if you didn't have a full-time contract, you didn't get paid holiday. So I suddenly found myself without a job and in desperate need of work, and ended up cycling past a shoot and was a receptionist at Gard Phillips Hsiung, and hence my entry into... I did a little bit of time out and publication and deadline before that, actually. There was a little blip, but then ended up at Gard Phillips Hsiung under the tutelage of Adrian Hughes. I don't know if you know Adrian Hughes, producer.
I remember Adrian.
Yeah, so he very much took me under his wing.
We might have bumped into each other, actually, because while you were probably there at Brighton, I would have been around the corner at the University of Sussex in Falmouth.
Oh, really? Oh.
I was studying, doing TV and film.
Were you? It's a great college.
And all of this time, I don't know about you, but all of this time, when I've been in our industry, I've kind of always wanted to go back and carry on doing the fine art that I was doing in those days. It was so much fun. I was a fine art painter. Do you still do any of the things that you were doing at art school?
Sadly, Pat, I think that is something, as you say, you always wish you could find the time to do it, but I think it really does need a bit more. I just can't dip in and out, something like that. I'll need to wait till I can properly retire and dive in to do it full time, because I'd love to do it again. But yeah, but interesting, you're a fine art painter as well. Do you do it now?
One of the reasons for coming to live in Portugal, actually, was the chance to get my easel out again. But as things happen, I've just transferred the stress of the work from one place to the other, and I'm hoping I'll find some more time in 2025. Let's see how things pan out.
Good.
Let me ask you another question. The cost of further education is skyrocketing, as we know. Lots of young people are turning away from the arts to focus on more commercial degrees. And I was just wondering what you would be able to say to somebody who's deciding, they want to decide what route they want to take about further education. And obviously being in the arts, what are the benefits that you've seen that's provided you in your career?
I think it's one of the biggest crimes of this century that arts subjects are not free. Well, any further education is not free for all, because you see the amount of people, and you probably the same, Pat. I mean, you have a creative degree. The amount of people you meet in this business who did some sort of creative degree, which probably wouldn't happen now because, as you say, the pressure to do something that's more commercially viable. But the time to grow, the people you meet, and I think it's such an amazing discipline to be able to build your own structure, if you like, structure your life in a creative way, which then can be transferred, as we see, into film, TV, many other businesses that are very commercial. But I think to say everyone has to do exactly the same sort of much more commercial and obvious pathway to a job is something that is just, the maths doesn't work up. It just really doesn't. And I think it must be awful to be faced with a decision to pay a huge amount of money to do something that you think, oh, I could just do at home. But it's not that, as we know. It's the people you meet, isn't it? And the discipline you learn from having to do a degree.
Totally. I was also at Maidstone College of Art, and in my class at that time was Tracy Emin, and I think she did okay.
Oh, she did all right, exactly. But would she have if she hadn't gone to art college? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Would she have been the person?
Exactly. Now, you've been at RSA now for the best part of your career. What is it about RSA specifically that's kept you there for so long?
Very good question, Pat. There were a few times I did have an opportunity to maybe leave or go somewhere else. And every time that I came back to working for Ridley and Tony, it was like, how could I not work with such creative, incredible, talented people who are also amazing business people too? They've got this art and commerce working so uniquely, and the opportunities were always great. They trusted you as well, which was enormous. They never sat over your shoulder, breathing down your neck, telling you what to do. There was a huge amount of trust. And I think it always came back to that. That was a great place to be. I think either you go and open your own business. This is a conversation I'd have and go, right, you either go and open your business now. Why would you go and work for X, Y, and Z when actually you're working for two of the most, revered people in this business? So that's always what brought me back to staying at RSA.
I worked with Tony many, many years ago, but sadly no longer with us. They say that many directors are very difficult to get along with. They can be very challenging. What's it like working with Ridley?
Ridley, you can't keep up with him. He is a ball of energy. He will always find the one question to ask you that you don't know the answer to, which is very frustrating because you think you can be prepped and know what, but he'll always find that one thing you're like, damn, I just should have thought of that. His capacity to grasp anything that you're talking about and come up with some solutions is quite phenomenal. So he's very inspiring. And even at his amazing age of 86, he's still firing on all four cylinders. I mean, he'll be shooting a film, he'll watch the rushes at night, he'll then brief the editor, and then he'll check something of another show that his producer on a TV thing. That's his day. I don't know how he actually sleeps.
I know lots of other people like that in the industry. I was talking to John Hegarty about that exact same thing only a few weeks ago. He's still going strong as well. I think it's a passion that these creative people have. It's not really like a job. I mean, I know I wake up every day thinking, crikey, somebody's still paying me for this.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit of that. Do you think?
I think so. He loves it so much. And I think he loves bringing everyone on the journey with him and, surrounds himself with incredible crew. He's got a great team around him. And I think, it's not work. It's an absolute passion for him. I remember Jordan telling me a really sweet story that they were going on holiday. Sandy, his wife at the time, said, we're going on holiday. And Jordan was a young kid. They got to the check-in and suddenly Sandy spotted some crew. She said, what a coincidence. What are you doing? And actually they were doing a scout. It slipped a little scout in while they were on holiday. So no holiday.
Now, one of the things that strikes me, but at the same time excites me, is innovation and change. And I think it's a really exciting time to be in the business. It's the reason also that I started this podcast nearly 2 years ago. Given your time at RSA, Kai, you must have seen a huge amount of change, though. What's been the most notable?
I think the two big things was obviously the switch to digital filmmaking, the sad death of film. I know it's coming back a bit, but that was one massive change when I started the switch from Steinbeck editing to Avid editing. And then obviously the internet, which we know made the most difference to production, speed of production, communication, travel, everything. It just changed our lives enormously.
There was quite a slow transition in the advertising business, though, if you remember moving from film to digital.
Yes.
That happened quite slowly. I used to love sitting there with my Chinagraph pencil, on a Steinbeck machine and doing my editing.
Yeah. And then looking for that frame that had gone, that someone sitting on it. I know, exactly. And that moment when you're waiting to know if the rushes are all right, can you strike the set? And all of that time. And also, you're trying to explain to runners now, you ask them for some pictures of a Swedish fjord or something, then off they go. We used to have to go to the Swedish embassy, book an appointment to go and find some nice slides, borrow them for a day, take them back. It's incredible if you think the time, how everything is sped up, which obviously makes difference to cost. It means things can be done much cheaper and faster, but I think sometimes by stopping and slowing these processes down gives you time to think about it.
I know it is better now, But I do have this emotional thing about the old days and the old ways of doing things. And I kind of feel a little bit sad sometimes that we've lost some of those manual craftsmanship processes, you know.
I agree.
Sometimes I look at my old reel-to-reel tapes that I have when I was in the sound studio, kind of going, oh my goodness, I used to love it, editing those tapes without going on to Adobe Audition or whatever it was, or Cool Edit Pro as it then turned out to be.
Well, exactly. It must be a bit like when plane travels started and everyone said, you know, if you make a journey and you're actually traveling on the ground, you see where you're going. If you just fly there, you miss out on part of it. And I think there's a bit of that, isn't there?
Exactly. Are you excited about the very fast adoption of AI that's happening right now? How does that impact you as a business?
Well, I think it's obviously been a number one topic of conversation amongst many people. And I think it'll be really interesting to see in the next few years how it exactly impacts. And I think obviously as a tool to help realize things, try things out, from our point of view, that is incredibly useful. How it actually works as far as replicating or taking creative decisions, I think that is a bigger unknown and will be very interesting to see how that plays out. But as an immediate tool to help you, think of an animatic now and all those things you used to have to do to try and imagine something, you can do something. I think that's where it's really, really helpful at this stage. But whether it's actually detrimental will be, I think, we'll need to see further down the line.
Do you think that the type of craftsmanship is changing? So with these new tools, and in particular with AI, is the new craft about prompting?
Yeah, it probably will be. And if you think for schools and education, learning how to debate and analyze is going to be so important. It's not about memorizing things anymore because you can have things at your fingertips. So I think a whole process of education and how you use these tools to help you make a better world, for science, etc. I think it'll be absolutely, that's the positive side of it. There's always obviously going to be a negative side too when people use it in a particular way. But I'm sticking with the positives here. It'll hopefully help people to, as a global community, use things to work together to find solutions for things.
RSA has produced some of the most iconic advertising over the years. One that we were involved with you on was bringing back to the screens recently was the Hovis Boy and the Bike campaign. We had a great time working with Casper and the rest of your team and the BFI, of course, on the remastering of the original film and reconnecting with the old Ashington Colliery brass band
yes.
who recorded that original music. That is such an iconic ad, but it kind of reminds me that really storytelling is at the heart of everything, whether it's AI or whether it's other techniques like virtual production. Really, it's about how do you tell great stories? And we had that great conversation with Sir John Haggerty on one of my previous podcasts a few months ago. Even if you're using AI, it goes out to get the bad stuff as well as the good stuff. So you're still going to need great human creativity as an intervention in that, as a conduit to telling the right stories.
Absolutely.
Do you believe in that?
Absolutely. I think, and the people who are able to harness AI to help them storytell, I think that will be the smart people. If you don't have that human creative touch to sort of sift through all the stuff you're given, it'll be like being the best editor in the world, isn't it? Being the best curator. I think that's where the massive skill set will be really, really valuable. But the story, that Hovis thing, I was fascinated when we broke down and looked how few shots were in that commercial. The client was like, surely there's more storyboard here. And I mean, no, that was it. It was only 8 shots, I think, or something like that. But the story was beautifully told, simply. And I think that's something to really learn from, isn't it? There's so much fast whiz bang at the moment and zooming around cameras. And you're just like, actually, what was that about? Did I get the story there?
I agree. I remember a film you did about a year or two ago. I think it was about a year or two ago. You did one for the Samsung S23.
Yes.
And it was shot actually on the camera itself. I mean, it looks beautiful, by the way. So I have to make an assumption that you did a hell of a lot of post-production on that to make it look so good. Is that true or not?
No, we really, really didn't. I mean, it was incredible. If you set the camera up, and we obviously had the best Samsung tech with us to help make sure that all the settings were really absolutely acutely to the right for the lighting, etc. A bit like you would set your DIT guy would do, or woman, person for a digital camera. It's the same sort of process. So you just make sure that the information you're getting is absolutely at the optimum lighting and quality. And there was very little time for post. that came out probably about a month after we filmed it. So it really was, you saw it on the camera. Ridley was amazed, actually. He was like, wow, that's phenomenal what you can do now.
Just think how much cheaper you can make it now.
Well, I know, but he still managed to have a lot of crew.
I bet.
So, but still, that's the thing. It's still the lighting. It was the, the styling, all those other things. Cool. I think that's where the camera, though, had come down to this tiny little thing, but there was still a lot of need for all the other craftspeople around it, which was interesting.
But it does make you think, though, we are now, because of technology, we're democratizing filmmaking or making great stories, because technology is not a barrier to making stuff. Really, it's just about great storytellers. Is that correct?
It's the story. It's absolutely the story. And forgive me if you've heard this already, but Ridley's story that I love about storytelling was when he was at the Royal College of Art, and he was actually studying graphics. He wasn't studying film or photography. They was just studying graphic design. But he walked past the office and there was somebody had a lovely Bolex camera in their office sitting behind them. And he said, oh, can I have a go with that? And the tutor said, well, what do you want to do with it? And he said, well, I want to have a go and make a little film. The guy said, come back with your story. Tell me what you're going to do and I'll lend you the camera. So he storyboarded out Boy on a Bike, came back, showed it to the guy, and he gave him the camera, and he spent the summer with Tony filming it. And lo and behold, it's in the BFI to this day, and, his first film. But that to me is the quintessential story to saying, if we've all got this camera, as you say, in our hands now, perhaps we can all go and make stuff. How many people must be downloading God knows how many images and things that they've been doing on their, just back from their holidays. But if you haven't got a proper story, then you're not going to have something of worth that people would be able to talk about in 60 years' time.
I completely agree. One of the trainings that I did when I worked at J. Will Thompson at the beginning of my time at JWT, and I went out to do a film out at the Shepperton Film Studios, and we did this thing about prep work. And actually, it's all about the prep, getting the prep right, getting the storyboard right. Everything has to be perfect before you go into production. I think Waterworld was a typical example of where you get it wrong.
Yeah.
Because I think they started filming before the story was completed. So
yes.
So the prep work is absolutely critical, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And then I think the other thing that happens in production where I think people are so attuned to be able to adjust and, adapt, as you say, the weather changes or an actor gets ill, or you can be all prepped, of course, but then on the day, things can happen that will just throw you and you have to think on your feet. You've only got that day to film. You've got to make it happen. So I think production, I always say, if people want to get into production, is common sense is almost the number one skill set. If you haven't got any common sense, then don't even think about getting it, because you really have to think on your feet, and you won't always, however much prep you might have done, you will still be thrown a curveball on the day.
And I know that directors get obviously all the glory, but in our world, in advertising business, I often think that the advertising producer is the unsung hero.
Yeah.
The person who puts it all together. What would you say about the advertising producer now? What is their role today with all of this proliferation of channels? And it's not just about making one TV ad anymore.
No.
How easy is it to be? And what do you look for when you're trying to find new people to join your team?
It's an incredibly hard skill set because you're having to manage so many different people. And I think this is where, if you are working with an agency producer, if they're a really good team, you can actually work together to make it happen, because they've got things coming at them from their client and their agency and their creatives. We've got crew and directors to worry about. So when the two people work together, it's absolutely essential, because the number of deliverables will keep changing. You'll suddenly get a BTS crew arrive. They'll want to be over there. Then you've got a stills person, So I think what we're trying to do at RSA is absolutely encompass all of these skill sets in our team, so we can simplify it for the clients and go, look, actually just come to us. We've got all of this offering for you, which will streamline it, because it's terrible to see more people flying in or arriving. They don't need to. We can do it. So I think that's our version of streamlining to help answer needs of clients, because the list is long, as you've probably seen, of deliverables.
Now, we talk about RSA, but actually you're a much bigger group in reality. It's called the Ridley Scott Creative Group. You've got 3 commercial production companies, RSA, Black Dog, Darling, and of course you have Scott Free, With all of these different companies that you have within the group, what's the difference between them all?
So we've kept the brands, so like Black Dog being this sort of younger, culturally relevant. It's not just music video, it's fashion. I suppose younger is probably the simplest way to define that brand, even though it was started by Jake over 30 years ago when music videos first started. RSA is the sort of bigger, overreaching, longer. It's since 1968, started in commercials. Scott Free is the absolute film, TV giant doing things like Gladiator 2, which is coming out in November. Very excited. And Darling, they're part of the division, have joined us for nearly 7 years now. And I think, we welcome working with lots of different people. It's a sort of umbrella for quality. And I think stronger together is always a phrase at the moment. We need to sort of bandy together to help share resources. We'll get a better production if you can all work together to solve problems, really. And I think that's part of the group mentality, is that under this umbrella, you can get all these disciplines. If someone brings us up and go, oh, we've got an experiential screen to be filled in the Alternet, can you do it? We'd just go, yes, we can, because I know within that group, we will have the right resources to do it. So I think it's just about saying yes.
So when you say that, because the agency and their clients are always like looking at producing a multitude of assets, sometimes hundreds of assets.
Hundreds.
And more personalized as well. Is that something also that you desire to take on, or do you just want to do the kind of big stuff and then hand it over to a transcreation or a kind of a versioning agency?
No, I mean, as much as possible, we'll do everything we can. And if it feels like it's better served to go somewhere else, then we will do that. We'll look at everything. It's a sort of solution-orientated discussion when we get a brief in and go, well, what can we do? Of course, we'll try and do as much as we can, but sometimes it's better to outsource. We've been working, it's no secret, for instance, Eurostar came to us to do a brief. They tried with an agency, I'm not sure who, to celebrate 20 years of Eurostar, and they looked that Jake Scott had directed the original. So we banded together with the creative team that we've got in-house and Jake to come up with an idea and shot it. It was great. And we've done lots of, since then, versioning and branding, but they wanted so much. We had to say, look, sorry, we just can't keep up with your workload. So we handed that to Hogarth, but we still work on the main creative tentpole idea. And then the assets are now going through Hogarth. So I think that's a good example of showing we could answer a problem, help them with the creative thing. But yes, because there was France involved as well, and Belgium and Amsterdam, you can imagine with Eurostar, it was just a bit too much for us. And then we've, put our hand up and go, you're better off going somewhere else for that.
We've talked about how brands are looking for different ways to cut through the clutter and at different forms of content. Branded entertainment we were talking about earlier, you and I, before we came on the call. It's a fusion of advertising and entertainment designed to engage the audience in a less intrusive way, building a connection emotionally. And arguably, RSA and the associated group of companies are well positioned to take advantage of that. And what are you doing now, and what are the challenges around branded entertainment?
It's a great subject, Pat. And the big thing we've been trying to do, we set up an unscripted division within RSA, and we've set up a creative within RSA, which work on between them. They will look at if a brand comes to us, we'll work out if it's an unscripted thing, is it something that's more episodic, try and tackle that problem to help. Because the journey with branded entertainment, as you said, there's branded content and there's branded entertainment. And I think they're quite different. And it's trying to explain to a client and ask them, what do they want? Do they want to be on Channel 4? Are they trying to be on Netflix? Where is the platform? That's a very big question. If it's purely for their own website, for instance, you can tackle this in a very different way. Amazon are very adaptable at now working with brands on content. So I think the first thing is to find out what that client wants, and then we'll try and address the problem. The other thing that happens as well has been when a brand has come to us and they've got a very clear idea. They want to make a feature documentary, for instance, and then we'll again get the right team together, work closely with them. And it's for everyone to understand that it's not a quick, it's a different result from a 30-second ad. You'll make your bigger piece, but you can cut your 30-second ads from that. It's a really interesting question, Pat, because I'd say there's no project that is the same at the moment. And that is exciting, but challenging. It's not like one size fits all. It's not the process of here's your 30-second script, make it and off it goes. These are really, really interesting, fluid projects that can change. And you go on a journey with your client when it's a branded content piece. And I just think that everyone just needs to get that right group of people together and you get some really exciting results.
You talk about your clients. In those particular situations, are those agencies or are they the agency's client?
Both. I've said there's very successful branded pieces that have come via an agency. We touched on BMW earlier. That was via Fallon America. They had the basic idea, but they came to us to hire A-list Hollywood screenwriters and directors but another one was Philips. I don't know if you remember that Philips thing we did that was DDB. They had the basic idea for Philips TVs, but then we executed the 8 short films using the same line. So often those to me have been the best partnerships. Another one I think of Sainsbury's with Christmas in a Day. We obviously did the ad campaign, but we managed to also get a 40-minute documentary, which still runs at Christmas on Channel 4. It's like 10 years later, it's become a sort of Christmas film, if you like. Again, they're all different, but they come with an agent. That was Abbott Mead. So I think often the best approach for us has been when an agency has a relationship with a client and together they come to us and go, this is a core of an idea. How can we all work together to make it happen?
Now, let's touch on a slightly sensitive subject, if I might. This subject, there's a conversation that's been going around. It's actually been going on since about 2017, really, which is about the in-housing of production into agency world. I've had numerous conversations with Steve Davis at the APA, and I spoke to Matt Miller of the AICP when I was in Cannes this year, and also on my podcast. This is becoming a big issue. One of those is the nurturing of new talent coming through. What's your view about the agency world now really wanting your business? Because they've made some very clear statements about what they want to bring into their organizations. How do you feel about that?
Well, it is a desperately, as you say, tricky and difficult subject. Do you remember in-house, was it Triangle Studios Saatchi's had?
That's right.
There's been various versions of this for many years.
Most agencies always had a little bit of a production unit. I had one when I was at Lea Burnett called The Orchard.
Yeah.
But it was never set up to compete with production houses as they are now, right? So
totally. And it's suddenly grown and grown. And obviously we saw COVID as another way when everyone was like, well, I can do production. Plus what we're saying about the ease of digital things makes things much easier. But what I think is the biggest issue, and you touched on it just then, Pat, is that the great talent to nurture and build them through a career path, if you like, I think really takes commitment, money, time, dedication, and those young directors benefit from being within a production house to do so. If our business is cut off so dramatically by the lack of commercial production because it's all gone in-house, we will become just agents. We could be very good agents and management for people, but we won't be able to afford to grow and nurture that talent. And I think the knock-on effect will be really noticeable in a few years because, as you say, before it was the sort of packaging or versioning or that type of thing that was done in-house. Now it's proper competition, and the amount of times we'll go into a pitch and know that we are one of 3 companies, but one of the companies is the in-house. And then you're like, do I really want to share my treatment knowing that the in-house person or whoever the director might be, freelancers is obviously their usual rather than in-house director, but they will hire a freelance. It's not a very level playing field. We always try and not do it.
The agency is also your client many times. So that must be difficult sitting on your side of the fence when you know that, do you want to bite the hand that feeds sometimes?
Yeah, exactly. It is a very difficult position to be in. Recently something else happened, which I wonder if this is going to be in trend, and I'd love to know, Pat, whether you think it is. So we'd been down the line with an agency and pitched on the job, took quite a long pitch. And just before it was about to confirm, I got a call from the agency, I think it was the MD and head of production, to say that the client has decided they'd like to decouple and just pay the agency for their strategy and creative and now move forward with the production just with us. And how did I feel about that? And I was like, well, that's quite a hard decision because you bought me the job. Obviously, we've worked with you. I don't want to upset you, but if you're saying this is the only way the production can happen and if not, they'll take it somewhere else, then I've got to say yes, and let's work together on this. So we managed to find a sort of middle ground where some of the agency were involved in the shoot, but not obviously as much. I left them to do that deal. But that was another I've had that when it's been known from the outset, but not literally. It was the day we were about to sign contracts that the client decided to change their mind.
Yeah. I mean, let's be realistic here. At the end of the day, the agency does bring something to the table.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Jobs are being made. So one of those things is client service, right? So, and whether it's the expertise of the client service person inside the agency, or whether it's the producer themselves, who often acts as a kind of client service person these days as well.
Exactly.
And managing that relationship as part of the process is critical. So if they're coming to you directly, I hear this often when clients to go working directly with production houses. Some production houses are not geared up to manage the different types of stakeholders that a client might have on their side of the fence.
Totally. I mean, we can hire in agency producers.
Sure.
There's a lot of freelance, but it's what you're saying, though. It's the relationships, isn't it? So the long-term relationships and the trust that the agency will have with that client, they'll know much more than we will, because we've just been brought in at this point. But it highlights, I think, how everyone is trying to save money. So I think the client's gone, oh, I can save some money doing this, so let's just try this as another way of doing production. Do you know what I mean? So you feel it's happening on all fronts, really. And I think the saddest thing, I think, will be the demise of many production companies if this continues, because I think I've spoken to a few production companies who have revenues are so down this year. There was obviously a bit of bounce back after COVID. Then there was the wars and various things. But I just think we're seeing an erosion of revenue because it's going in-house. The amount of work that we're seeing is now in-house. And I think that's going to have a very detrimental effect on production companies moving forward.
Well, I hope the debate continues. And I'm always happy to get involved in that conversation, because I always have strong viewpoints on it.
Yeah.
And, I want to make sure that there's still a very strong independent production community.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important thing. So that's my view.
It really is. And also, they just can't move as quickly as production. As you know, an agency is a much bigger organization. And until they give their in-house production a bit more autonomy to react to, like I was saying, the problems on a day when you suddenly need a private jet because the talent's stuck. I've had to get our credit card out to pay for it because the agency couldn't. So if you think that's even with when the agency's working with us, they couldn't, even though it wasn't in our budget, for instance. So it's just that fast-paced thing that happens with production that I think the production companies are just better equipped and trained to do than your big agency production.
Saying that, would you like to work more directly with clients?
Absolutely. Bring it on, Pat. We'll work with anyone, of course. And we do. And I think there are certain clients that come to us because they know the pedigree and they want a particular director, and they're quite clear about what they want. It probably leads us down this branded content route, a bit like Samsung. They knew what they wanted. They want Ridley to direct something that showed the phone, dark interiors as well as exteriors. That was the brief, and no guns. Okay, simple. We can do that. So hence the Samsung idea that came out. But I think we're in a very privileged position at RSA because of that, because of the, as you say, the group, the Scot-free, the film people around, and the longer content that we do. That I think people see that we could maybe answer things that maybe other production companies couldn't.
We touched just a few seconds ago on nurturing new talent, bringing new talent into the industry. And you are chairwoman of the Young Director Award. What's your view on the talent that's coming through at the moment? How do you find new great talent?
Those awards are amazing, by the way. The entries, I was always astounded. It's just the quality is incredible. So I think those awards are a very good platform. I think music videos used to be a great way for talent, not so much, but they are, another way that you do look. Short films are another. There's something called, have you heard of the Aesthetica Film Festival in York? That's a great place to look for new talent. And Nowness, another great platform. We found some directors through Nowness. They're very good at curating if you want sort of the more fashiony world. So I think there's a few places you go looking, but it is hard because the directors often just want to make films. They don't want to make short form. They want to just, they've got the eye on the prize, and you get some amazing young people who are making features in their 20s. It's quite incredible. So harnessing that talent and nurturing it is a challenge. It's very hard, and everyone needs to live. You know what I mean? So trying to balance working, they all need a job, but they really want to make their films. I've got some great youngsters who just came to see me, and they're working full time as a barista, and in between they're making their films. So people are resourceful, but it's an expensive business. Let's be honest. If you want to dedicate your life to it, and I think this is the thing, you don't want it just to be wealthy middle class kids who can afford to stay at home and live off mum and dad. You need people from all walks of life. And I think that's the big challenge for us now, is to make sure we're finding the voices from everywhere and helping talent wherever they might be.
I agree. When you get out of bed in the morning, Kai, what are the things that matter to you in your life, not just necessarily in the business that you're working in? What are the other things that might matter to you? What do you like to get involved in?
Well, certainly nurturing young talent. I'm also a school governor for a fantastic school in Tower Hamlets called Elam. That's been really interesting working with them and seeing that. So it's only 16 to 18-year-olds. It's just like a sixth form college. That's been really eye-opening. We've got a set up with them where we take interns now from there, which has been really, really beneficial, I hope, to both sides. A good deal is when it works for everyone. I think trying to expand the lens on the people that get into this business now is so important. I think it goes back to what we were saying, Pat, about education, the fact that it's costly. People are worrying about cost of living, and therefore you're not expanding the interesting people that should be coming into this business. It should be open to everyone. And I think that's, to me, something that I'm really passionate about.
The big question I have is, how do you find the time for all of these things? and you certainly don't have the time for keyboards anymore. Because I discovered that you were a keyboardist.
I was.
In a pretty successful pop band, right?
Well, they were definitely successful after I left. Yeah, I was in, I did music. My A-levels were art and music, and I played the piano. And so through friends, I worked at a greengrocer in North London. Anyway, I ended up being enjoying the rehearsals with a band called Amazulu. It's all female reggae band. And I was absolutely loved the rehearsals. We got our first little gig somewhere and I froze. I completely got stage fright and had to leave, and was never asked back anyway, because I absolutely made a mess of it. So yes, that was my little claim to musical fame.
What was that hit they had? Was it Too Good to Be Forgotten, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And that was about 5 years later. They fired the lead singer when I was there. And the woman who came in, she sort of helped turn the band around. But yeah, it was a good fun. The rehearsals were great.
Do you still play the keyboards?
No, unfortunately. My husband's a musician, so there's lots of chance to play, but he's so good, I just sound so bad, I don't bother anymore either. So it's the painting and the piano playing I've got to get back on track with, Pat.
Brilliant stuff. Look, we're nearly at the end of my podcast. I've loved talking to you, but finally we have the question we have to ask all of our guests, since it's become one of the highlights of this podcast. Kai, what's your favourite ad of all time?
It's such a difficult question. I know I was warned that this would come up, and I've been racking my brains going through my Rolodex of the wealth of fantastic ads. And I love the idea of the Immortal Awards. It's like, what can you remember 10 years ago? And you keep thinking of what was the sort of thing that you remember each year of the awards. And I have to go back to, I was watching it. I was reminded, I hadn't seen it for a while, actually. We were showing some clients, some EV vehicle clients showed them BMW films that Tony, Joe Carnahan and John Woo did back in 2000. And I enjoyed watching them so much. And I thought, God, that really was a turning point. It was groundbreaking. Watching Gary Oldman as playing the devil and with James Brown in a car on the Vegas Strip. I mean, how much more entertaining can you get? And I think, to me, that was such a turning point in what you talked about as branded content, branded entertainment. I thought that would change the dial, and it's taken so long. We're still, 24 years later, and it's only still a conversation that people are going, oh, what is it? Does it work? BMW sold out all of those. They were targeted advertising. They sold that, was it the Z3 or 4? I forget now. I'm not a big petrol head. But they sold out after those 3 films came out. And this is before the internet.
Yeah.
They had to send DVDs through letterboxes, but they still worked.
I remember seeing those films first time round and thinking, I would have loved to have been part of that.
Yeah.
I would love to have been the agency producer making those films. And they excited me at the time. And you know what? We're going to post them up on the podcast website so people can have a chance to look at them again.
Great.
If they haven't seen them. But I think they're fantastic. What a great choice.
Thank you.
Of best ads. Well, kind of not really just ads, are they? They're kind of best branded entertainment, I guess.
Exactly. A bit groundbreaking. It's what I'd like to think. They sort of set the bar. And, as you know, Cannes had to make a new category. That's when they created the Titanium Award, because they didn't have a category where that would sit. So I thought, well, that's pretty good then, isn't it?
Brilliant stuff. Look, I've so enjoyed chatting to you. I could talk to you all day because we share a lot of the same passions.
Yeah.
And we know a lot of the same people. And maybe we get a chance to do it another day in person.
That would be great, Pat. Thank you.
Today we talked to Hsiung, Global Managing Director of RSA Films, and covered the production industry as a whole and what it takes to successfully run a famous and iconic business like RSA. To find out more about the MCA podcast, please head to thepodcast.com, where you'll find details on all my guests, links to their favorite ads, and full transcriptions of all the episodes. If you'd like to feature on the podcast or have any comments, questions, or feedback, please email us at podcast@murphycop.com. I'm Pat Murphy, CEO of MCA. Do come and connect with us on LinkedIn or Instagram, of which all the links in the notes for this episode will be there. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again to Kai, my team at MCA, and to my production team at What Goes On Media. Thanks for listening. See you next time.